Hey guys, so today we're going to test quiet mode, and there's a reason, and it's because I may have made a mistake here in my judgment. It doesn't operate, I think, exactly as I expected it to. I believe it consumes less power under load and under normal operation, in fact, while unplugged, than do the other two power modes. And what I'm talking about here is not the Windows power settings under this. This is not to say best power efficiency, balanced, or best performance is what's in play here. I'm talking about this power setting in the Samsung settings app. So much has been made about the fact that these Samsung Galaxy Book4 Edge laptops don't handle the processor power consumption the same way as some of these other laptops that have the new Snapdragon X Elite chipsets. Some of the other ones, even though they have, like, say for instance, an X1E 78100 processor in them, actually perform close to as well as the 80100 does under certain circumstances. Some of the benchmarks seem to be inconsistent in that respect. And other ones, even though they have very powerful processors, such as the Book4 Edge 16-inch, sometimes perform less powerfully than you would expect. Not as well as you would expect, in spite of the fact that they have a more powerful CPU. And one of the reasons why is the Snapdragon chipset CPUs, the SoCs, actually allow for a huge range of performance differences based on how much power is fed to the CPU. So what's interesting about this is that it seems that Samsung defaults to feeding a pretty decent amount of power to the CPU under load. So I've got a device here, which you've probably seen before. These have been around for a while. They measure power input from this, for instance, from this USB-C adapter into the laptop. So when I plug it into this, it has actually a digital readout, and it shows the number of watts and a bunch of other things. Unfortunately, I can't show you the actual display on that because it's upside down due to the orientation of this laptop. I'd have to rotate this camera around, but I'm going to look at it and I'm going to check it out, and I'm going to read off some of the parameters as we go here. So I'm going to start with optimized in balanced mode, and we're going to run another Geekbench here, and we're going to see how this looks. So let's see what kind of power consumption. And then over here, I've got HW info to check clock rates just to see how things look on that. So again, we're on optimized, balanced right now. So here's the score that we received. It is 2712 for the single core and 14304 for multi-core, right about what we would expect based on the previous benchmarks I ran. So now I'm going to give this a few minutes to cool down, and we're going to run this again under Samsung's power setting of quiet and leave the power mode on optimized in Windows. So hang tight. Okay, this seems to be cool enough now. So let's run another benchmark on, again, quiet mode and the same settings here, which is power mode balanced. And then when we're done with this, we'll try to stress it a little more using some more intensive utilities. So let's run this benchmark next. I'm going to actually just kind of cut through on this one again so that you don't have to sit here and wait for this to finish. And we'll come back in a minute. I'll report back on what type of wattage, power consumption, and what type of clock rates I was seeing. Right now, though, everything still appears to be about the same. We'll come back in a minute. Okay, so this just completed. And we got exactly the same, basically, results. And that's not surprising, because from what I witnessed here, the power consumption has not changed while plugged in, despite the power mode setting in the Samsung app, the battery and performance setting, I should call it, because it's called power modes kind of confuses it with this. There are so many power settings on these darn Windows 11 laptops, especially ones with special OEM settings like these Samsungs. So what does this mean? It means that you shouldn't expect substantially different performance, or any kind of really different performance while you're plugged in, despite the power mode set here, if it's quiet or optimized. It makes no real difference. By the way, I can still hear the fan at the moment, but it is very subtle. So again, these things are dead silent pretty much. I mean, they really are, under almost every circumstance, inaudible. So that's cool, and that really hasn't changed despite the power setting. What this tells me is that we may see different results when unplugged, and the only way I'm going to measure the power doing that is to see how the battery drain looks, and you can actually get some of the metrics here that should help. There's no CPU package power reading in here, so I can't tell based on any of this how much actual power is being consumed. But that's okay. It doesn't really matter because we can kind of surmise that based on what happens with the battery here. So we're going to take a look at that next. And also, I'm going to run stress testing to see how that looks. So, whether there's a difference in power consumption during actual complete synthetic system stress. So let's go and unplug. Okay, and let's go back here again and make sure we are on optimize this time, and I'll let this cool down for a minute and we'll try again. Okay, here we are back at 80% full charge. Gonna unplug again, and now we're going to, well, as soon as I log in here, we're going to start this again as soon as I reset these statistics, which should help us out in determining how much this is actually how much power this is actually consuming. So how much battery and power. So let's let this run. We'll see what score we get, which we should get the similar score that we got previously when I ran this thing in that previous power benchmarks video. But this time we're going to take a look at the power consumption and see whether or not there's a difference when we switch to quiet mode on battery power. So we'll come back. All right, so we're almost done here, and so far the readings are about negative 17.5 watts on average for consumption. So again, these scores are very similar. We're down about 1,000 on the multi-core, not anything major, and it's about what we'd expect unplugged, on balanced, on optimized and balanced. 17.5 and about 260 minutes estimated for total battery runtime under those circumstances. So and again, this is pretty heavy synthetic stress here, so keep in mind this is not something you're going to experience in a normal day, of work probably for the average person. That's a pretty darn good score for unplugged, on balanced, and on optimized, which is what this is here. So again, we're going to go back here and just see balanced is the power mode. We're not going to change that. We're going to leave that the same. Next thing we're going to do once this cools down and once it charges back up to 80% is we're going to run it under quiet mode and see if that makes a difference. So we'll let this charge back up, we'll let it cool back down, and then we'll try that next. All right, so we're back at 80%. Now we're going to run the exact same benchmark again, except this time we're going to switch the Samsung power setting to quiet, and we are going to keep an eye on things, reset these statistics here, and kind of just see how things look after we get done with this one. So once again, I will report back and we'll see how the numbers compare to the way they were on optimized and balanced. Somehow that did not reset, so let's try this again. That looks better. One more time here. All right, there we go. Now we're going to run the benchmark. Okay, all right, now we'll come back. Sorry about that. All right, so we're almost done here in quiet mode, and let me tell you, there is a notable difference in power consumption. We're at about 13.3 watts consumption right now. That's what it rests at. That is pretty notably different, and of course the score is a little bit lower, but not substantially. I mean, that is very close to what we got previously. By the way, I can still hear the fan running. It's nearly inaudible, but it's not really much of a difference in terms of the noise level as it was previously. So what this tells me is that you could save a pretty good 3-4 watts probably on average under like some sort of like moderate load. Normal workload, maybe a little more than that, I'm sure, just by running in quiet mode in the Samsung power settings here. So maybe that's something a lot of people are actually going to do. This thing is really not that much warmer. In fact, on the bottom, let's see what it feels like on the bottom. I mean, there's a little bit of warmth here, but it's not at all uncomfortable to the touch. So this is not something I think would be uncomfortable to use on the lap under these settings. This is really interesting stuff. So you do appear to gain efficiency probably because you're getting similar scores, and also gain battery life by running in the power mode quiet under the Samsung settings, even if you don't adjust the Windows power mode settings, which again, this was still at optimized here, or I'm sorry, at balanced. I can get mixed up because all the different terminology here. Anyway, the next thing is going to be interesting to see is under full load whether or not this makes a difference. So we're going to actually check that. We can already say that there is a reasonable expectation you should be able to expect probably 15 to 20% better battery life just by switching this setting from optimized to quiet. So I'm going to actually give that real world usage over the next few days and report back on that. But I think scientifically we should expect that to be the case. So we're going to let this charge back up, cool down a little bit, and then we're going to run a different tool to stress CPU and GPU synthetically at nearly 100%, or at least as much as possible, and see how that looks in terms of power consumption, clock rates, and all those things. So hang on, we'll be back. All right, this is Furmark. And if you're not familiar with the tool, it is a synthetic stress tool to basically check a chipset for temperature problems and just kind of keep an eye on clock rates and stuff like that. We use it all the time, or I should say we used to use it all the time when I benchmark laptops for notebook check. A lot of benchmarking companies use these things because it's great to be able to synthetically stress a chipset under stress conditions that you know won't exist in normal day-to-day usage, but just to make sure it can survive just in case, and how the clock rates and temperatures and things like that look in the process. So we're going to start off with, I'm going to open up CPU burner because it's really difficult to open this once you've got GPU running. This will stress the CPU at 100%. I'm also going to run a GPU stress simultaneously, and we're going to do this on battery power. We're going to keep an eye on discharge rates, just as before. And we're back, by the way, on optimized balanced. So we're going to reset this. I'm going to start CPU burner, and I'm going to start the GPU stress test. I'm going to keep an eye on clock rates here, and also on temperatures. And of course, most importantly, power consumption, which is kind of the focus of this video. So right now we are at, we're consuming 48.5 watts right now. It's consistent, 49, 45, very close to that range. We're going to let this run for a few minutes here, or at least for a minute, and try to see how the clock rates and how the power consumption stabilizes here. So right now we've got it actually down to 26 watts. So it started in the 40 to 45 or 45 to 50 range. It's already gone all the way down to 26, and it's kind of staying in that range now. So this was not too long after we started, and right now we're about 50 seconds in. Let's see how the noise levels sound. You can hear the fan, which is pretty uncommon with this thing, but it's not noisy, it's not loud. 27 watts. It looks like about 26, 27 watts is where this thing stabilizes under balanced optimized, if you leave it like that and you stress it for a long time. So we're at a minute and a half. We still have basically the same power consumption. Haven't seen clock rates drop yet. They're all stable at 3.4 gigahertz, so that's a good sign. Also, we've still got roughly the same performance coming from Furmark, from the GPU stress, 11, 12 frames per second. Nothing earth-shattering, of course, but the idea here is how are you going to feel when you're operating, unplugged with this thing. So just a little refresher on this. The battery in the 14-inch version, which is what we're looking at here, is about a 55 watt-hour battery. So, doing the math, if you're consuming a little bit below 30 watts, on average, you're going to get maybe 2 hours of use, probably, somewhere in that neighborhood, depending on the circumstances. And again, this is under full synthetic stress. So this is, no matter what you're doing, there's almost no way you're ever going to run the battery out faster than this with these power settings. So again, we're on optimized and balanced. Okay, I feel pretty good about this. I think this is pretty trustworthy at this point. We're still at 26.6 watts used, and everything looks pretty stable. I mean, we have no issues. The fans have not gotten any louder subjectively. They sound about the same to me. We're going to stop this. I'm happy about this. And we're going to let this charge back up again and cool down. And then we're going to run the exact same thing yet again, synthetic stress again. But this time we're going to put it into quiet mode. I'm going to let this cool down first, and we'll be back in just a second. All right, so I should have mentioned this before I paused the video, but also this has not really gotten uncomfortably warm on the top either. It's just slightly warmer subjectively. Again, you really can't tell much of a difference. This is not, the touchpad's not any warmer. The sides feel pretty cool still. The middle of the keyboard at the top, again, is kind of the only part where you notice. I'll zoom out here so you can see what I'm talking about. This part here maybe is a little bit warmer than it usually is. Obviously, we're under heavy stress. Not right now. It's all pretty cooled back down, but under stress, this warms up here. This stays pretty cool still. This stays pretty cool. Touchpad feels comfortable. So again, this is pretty well handled by this machine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch this over to quiet. which should reduce the fan speed and probably also the power consumption of the processor. We're going to find out. I'm going to reset this again after I unplug. We're at 80% battery again. Okay, I'm going to reset these. I'm going to start this. I'm going to run this. I'm going to go back and take a look at this and see how power consumption looks under these conditions. So again, the only thing we've changed here is we've gone to quiet mode in the Samsung power settings, and we have not changed the Windows power mode at all. We've not done anything with Windows, so we'll see what difference this makes. Right now we are consuming right about 21.5 watts. So if you've got optimized for Samsung power mode and balanced for the Windows power mode, which again, I'm not changing at all, it starts at 45 to 50 watts power consumption, power drain on the battery. Then it drops down after about 30 to 45 seconds or somewhere in that neighborhood probably to about 27 watts. And it stays consistent at 27 watts power drain. Well, this is 10 watts below that after it drops down. So you've got a savings of 10 watts in that case. That's more than 30% actually savings in that case. And this only begins at 21 point something watts. And your performance is still pretty good. I mean, you've still got 3.4 gigahertz clock rates with full CPU consumption across the CPU benchmarks. And then you've also got FurMark running at 9 to 10 frames per second on average, whereas previously it was about 11 to 12. So none of this stuff is unimpressive in any way. This is pretty awesome. Let's see what temperatures look like again here. So I'm going to try these. I mean, again, it's only mildly warm here in the middle. It's not anything uncomfortable. On the bottom, the sides are a little bit warmer than maybe they have been in the past, but none of this stuff is uncomfortable in any way. And again, I really think this is pretty interesting, these results are here. So let's plug back in and let's see if that makes a difference. And it should with power consumption. Obviously power consumption it will, but see if that makes a difference on performance, I mean to say. So it's charging at 24 watts right now. We've got GPU performance of about 10 frames per second locked in. Clock rates are still locked at 3.4 gigahertz. So yeah, what's the takeaway here? The takeaway here is I think under most circumstances, you're probably going to want to run quiet mode, balanced Windows power profile. That's going to give you great run times, similar to what we see from the Lenovo Yoga Slim 7X and the Microsoft Surface laptop, both of which seem to have more conservative power settings out of the box than the Samsung laptop does. So that's an interesting difference. I don't know why Samsung opted for that. I'm also not sure exactly why they weren't a little bit more explicit with how their power consumption settings work, because this is a pretty useful thing to know, I think. And now, to have a little bit of fun here, let's see what happens if we go up to high performance. And of course, we haven't reset these numbers, but that's okay. We're kind of just keeping an eye on how things are looking. See, look at this. Now our charge rate is down to 11.5 watts because a lot of this power is being funneled into the CPU. It's not charging the batteries much. 11.5 watts. Look at that. That's 15.9. That's the highest charge rate. You can hear the fans. Fans are notably louder. They're actually audible under this mode. So again, kind of comparing here, just with live power consumption here, I haven't really, you can't pay attention to these averages here. I'm not going to reset them and kind of keep an eye on those, but take a look at your quiet power consumption here. So right now it's actually negative 12.5, maybe because we don't have this in the foreground. Let's see here. Negative 13 right now. I'm not sure why this is so much lower at the moment than it was. It's kind of interesting. But if we switch up to optimized, we should see that go up. Sure enough, we do. We're at 19. Climbing up to 20 here. So we've jumped about 7 watts, maybe 6, 7 watts, just switching to optimized. Take a look at that. Okay, now we're going to go up to high performance. And we should expect to see it go up even further. There we go. We are now at 48 watts. Look at that. Huge difference, right? 49. So about 50 to 51 watts consumption. And this is stable. It's staying at that range. I expect it will probably remain there. Well, actually, no, it's gone down. It's gone down to about 35. That's okay. It's fine. This is all much higher than it was previously. So, you know, again, the lesson here is if you just absolutely need performance, obviously high performance will give you that at the expense of a lot of efficiency. When I say efficiency, I mean, you're not getting that much more performance actually in high performance mode than you are out of optimized or even in quiet mode. So, I mean, I think most people are going to be just fine in quiet. They're not really going to care. It's going to give them enough. You saw I was at 13-ish frames per second in high performance mode. We're at 9 to 10 in quiet. Who cares? The power consumption is so much lower in quiet. This is pretty great. So, and again, you know, the fans are audible in high performance mode. Maybe if you need it to be cooler, that might be useful, but it's consuming more power also, and it's less efficient. So I'm not sure it would necessarily be cooler. It might just be louder and then give you maybe a squidge more power, like maybe 10 to 15% more power total. Over quiet mode, maybe 20%. Not a huge difference though. It's really not. So these are all really interesting results. I think the conclusion here is that the average person, like I said, should run in quiet mode under balanced, and I think they will get very good battery run times in that setting. And power consumption should be nice. I think it's going to work really well. So I'm going to actually try this for a day or two, and I'll report back with my results in real world usage terms about how much battery life I'm getting under optimized quiet, or I'm sorry, under balanced quiet. We'll see how that goes. This is really interesting because it's a novel chipset. The way these chips handle power is pretty different from the way the Intel chips handle power, because you can feed them pretty much whatever you want and they'll just take it and adjust their performance accordingly. So I think this is pretty interesting stuff. So anyway, I'll be back with some more real world impressions, but for now I really appreciate you watching, and if you like it, just like and subscribe. You know, the usual stuff. I never ask people to do that because I just don't try hard enough for you to actually do it, but if you do, good for you. You're awesome, and you're giving me a nice little side gig here just to have some fun with.